Hello, welcome to this game review. We'll have a look at a game where black got a big advantage and had the chance to basically checkmate his opponent, but he somehow didn't find the correct knockout. So let's take a look. It started as a Sicilian, Scheveningen. Wait, not a Scheveningen, I mean a Sveshnikov Sicilian. Here white's only real move is knight d to b5, threatening knight d6, after which d6 happens. And now white has knight d5 or bishop g5. And the play will be quite sharp. In general, I wouldn't really recommend playing such difficult Sicilians at this level, but to each his own. Here white made a mistake of taking on c6. This is basically always inaccurate as it helps black defend the d5 square. Bishop g5 also kind of useless. Black can just ask the bishop what it's doing. And if it's giving itself up, then black will have the bishop here. Okay, bishop b4. Bishop d3, h6. The white bishop went back, so it's a question as to why he even went there. And after d5, black is better as he has the center, and his center is quite well secure. White makes a bad exchange on d5, exchanging the e4 pawn for the c6 pawn. He should just retreat to defend his pawn on e4 indirectly. After this, black's advantage increases. Now he just has a huge center. White's pieces are very badly coordinated, and black tries to take over the initiative. So first d4. So it's unclear why d4 should be played right now. Black can just castle and then see what happens, but okay, e4. Bishop takes d2, and then castles. And here black decides to go knight e4, and the comment is that black is trying to bring his pieces towards the attack, but it's hard to understand what attack we are talking about, as the white king isn't very weak and black's pieces aren't very well placed to do anything. Black has to understand that his majority is on the king side. He should just push his pawns after improving his pieces, so maybe start with rook a d8 to help with the protection of d4. The next move can be e4 or rook to e8, and the play should be quite simple. Black has more space. This knight is dominated. There's not much difficulty here. Okay, knight e4, and the rook comes to c8. d3 is a big threat. Knight g3, and black decides to protect it like this, but this kind of destroys black's structure. It wasn't a very good idea to ruin your structure like this. At this point, black has to understand that to use his advantage, he doesn't need to do anything special, like f5. Here black can just move his knight or defend it with a queen, and black's advantage lies in the fact that his rooks are a little bit better. There's a weakness on c2. White's rooks are undeveloped. He also has a bit more space. He doesn't have to do anything special. Or maybe queen d5 as well. But okay, f5 is possible. And white takes. And now the f file is open, but on the other hand, these pawns might become weak. Queen d2, like white develops. Queen g4. And this move is kind of hard to understand. It's unclear what the queen is trying to do here. It says it's trying to provoke a weakness, trying to provoke f3, but f3 is simply not possible because of the pin, and it's unclear why white would exchange these weak pawns. White can just bring his rook into the game, threaten queen e2 to either exchange queens or get the pawn, and the queen's position on g4 is strange. Instead, black should probably use his majority in the center, push d3 to create a passed pawn, and go from there. Rook f d8 can be played. Black should be a bit better. But after this, rook c6, black's trying to attack. White is not really reacting to black's attack. He should just play queen e2, after which white might be kind of fine, because he may get this pawn. If black exchanges, then this rook endgame can't be too great for black, as the pawns are weak. Black should probably retreat. After taking, he can go to this rook endgame where he takes on c2, and black should be quite a bit better here. But rook ac1, rook g6, g3, rook f3, and now all of black's pieces are around white's king, so suddenly the attack is happening. and black will just have to find a knockout. The queen has left the defense. At this point, black didn't know what to do, but he only fought for like 50 seconds. We should feel that something should happen here, right? When we have three major pieces against a king, which is only protected by some pawns, we have to imagine that something should happen. And that something here would be the simple move e3, which is a pawn break. It's also a very forcing move. Forcing moves are important because it threatens this, which will just end the game, so white has to react. Somehow he can't just take a pawn or something. And the big point is that if here black takes, and this is quite clearly checkmate. The black should be able to calculate this. If not, then it's very important to study some tactics, and especially tactics related to attacking the opponent's king. But queen f5 is kind of useless, and this just blunders the e4 pawn to a check, which white for some reason doesn't take. Here black should take on f2, and after this c3 activates the last rook, and white should be quite okay. Black's pieces are not very well placed for a rook endgame. They were only placed there to win by checkmate, but this did not happen. Rook e2. Now again black should just play e3. It's very strange that he plays h5 instead to threaten the pawn break of h4, but why are we making a pawn break in two moves when a pawn break in one move is possible, especially when this pawn is just hanging. So after e3 black is just simply winning. There's not much for white to do here. The f2 pawn is hanging, and if rook fe1, then now black can play h5 or something, and then play h4, and white is just paralyzed. He cannot do anything. And again, if here, then probably taking here is good enough, but d takes e is fairly obvious. Rook f2 might come, or just taking on f2. Something should give here. But h5, now this pawn is hanging, and now black is forced to go to a rook endgame. And as before, black's pieces are not very well placed for an endgame. He went all out for an attack, and the attack didn't materialize, and now he is not doing great. He should try to improve the rooks somehow, but he played rook g5, which is a very passive move defending the pawn, and now black's chances are not great. He continues with d3, but this loses another pawn, and at this point black is lost, as he is in a rook endgame with 2 pawns less, and also some weaknesses. And white played well up to a certain point in this rook endgame with 3 pawns, but then some stuff happened. Black got somehow some counterplay. At this point black is down 4 pawns, so it's basically resignable, but white's technique was very bad. At some point black started taking pawns, first on b6, then on a7. Black took the pawn at some point. Here only 2 pawns are left for white, which is of course winning as they're connected past pawns, but apparently it's not that easy to win for white, and so white should really look at some rook endgames. So h4, we will skip some moves. White made some progress, but at this point he got a little bit stuck. At this point white should just improve his king, try to play g4, maybe put his rook on e4 to block the checks, and continue marching the pawns. But at this point h5 was played, which is a very bad move. White should just give this check, but at this point this is the only move. White has to give this check, making black's king move somewhere, and then h5, and this should be quite easily winning. But after h5, these pawns are both now weak, and after a move like rook b6, white will not win anymore, because black will be able to take this pawn and then come back to take this pawn. So white's king is not very well placed. But black took this one, and then unfortunately now the king is cut off horizontally, and it cannot help in the defense of this pawn. So a few moves passed, white found this defense, and the rest of the game didn't last long. So black played quite well in the opening and a bit later, but for some reason he couldn't find the move e3, which would finish the game more or less, and he also just lost his e4 pawn for some reason. And again, forcing moves, checks, captures, and attacks. This is an attack. It attacks f2. we have to consider moves like this, as taking with the pawn on f2 will be quite painful for black, I mean for white.